So today I'm joined by Jordan Weisman. You probably know Jordan as a game designer, and as a game designer for what depends on what you're into. But if you've played anything that has to do with Shadowrun, if it's the TTRPG game or whether it's Shadowrun Returns, you probably have sampled some of his work. And I'm very happy to talk to you, Jordan, about what you're working on right now and what's coming for us next. We're also going to talk about when, but first of all, thank you for being here. Hi.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are going to talk about something called Adventure Forge and about Tales of Fortunata. And Adventure Forge, as far as I understood, it's going to be a tool. It's a tool for people to build games and also to share those games. But first of all, what kind of tool is it? What kind of games can you work on in Adventure Forge?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you have it very right. Adventure Forge is a tool to create narrative video games without having to write any code at all. Because many of us, we have stories to tell, we have games we'd love to create, but we're not software engineers. Yeah. And we don't have access to software engineers. And even though I've been privileged enough through my career to always have a team to work with to realize my ideas, I still often wished I could just sit and play with it until it was right myself, rather than having to keep writing design docs and sending it to the engineering team and them sending it back to me. And it would be like not fun to play, because anything you write the first 10 times is not fun to play. So you have to go around that circle a number of times. And so, so it's a tool set to be able to create narrative games. And then to share them through the Adventure Forge app with individual friends or groups or with the entire community. And if you wish to monetize those and charge for your work, you can do so as well within the platform. For us, the concept of narrative games is very broad because we wanted to be able to take what has been kind of subdivided. There's lots of kind of subdivided narrative genres and empower you as a designer, as a writer, as an artist, to mix all those together in any way that makes sense for the game and story you're trying to create. So that goes from anything from like straight text-only, choose-your-own-path style games to visual novels, to click and point adventures, to dating sims, hidden object games, and all the way up to very sophisticated isometric RPGs, like the ones we were creating at Harebrained Schemes for the Shadowrun Returns series.
Okay, so that's a lot of different, basically, genres of games. Also, they're all narrative, but the jump from just having an interactive story to having an isometric RPG is huge, at least in my mind. And so what tools will we have? How do we design like an environment and the interactions? And what are you planning for that?
Yeah, by all means. So it is a series, as you said, it's about a collection of tools, right? It's not a single tool. It's like a toolkit that is inside of Adventure Forge.
We have skipped a bit, so you could prepare and show me what it's going to look like. So we're also going to talk a little bit about Tales of Fortunata in a minute, but that is kind of also your showcase for how this is going to work. So we're going to look at what you can build with Adventure Forge, and then maybe we can get a peek at how to build it.
Yeah, by all means. So thank you for letting me kind of open things up here on the screen. So as you mentioned, Tales of Fortunata is a new game universe that myself and Sean Stewart have been working on. And it's one of the first ones that we're putting into Adventure Forge. As we mentioned before, Adventure Forge has this wide spectrum of tools. And this little demo kind of shows a number of those tools, how they can be used to create different parts of a game. So as we start here, it has a little presentation just to help kind of set the tone for the world of Fortunata, and then illustrates your classic kind of choose your own adventure style branching narrative. Then it kind of goes into more of a visual novel style presentation of a conversation between different people, in this case, in a tavern in magical version of Renaissance Venice, which is where Tales of Fortunata is set. And in this case, the character on the left there is Fortunata, an aspiring thief in this world. And then it transitions to a isometric RPG, where the first two scenes set up that she needs to break into this judge's mansion and steal his signet ring, which she has learned is on a chain around his neck. She tries to get in through the front door there, is told, nope, you don't look like nobility. You're not on the invite list. You can't get in. But she sees that there's an open window. And so she's going to try to maneuver things around so that she can climb up to that window. One of the things we talked a little bit about the Shadowrun Returns RPG system, RPGs that we did at Harebrained Schemes.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited to say that the tools that we have in Adventure Forge are pretty far superior to what we had when we built those games. For instance, this ability to move things around in isometric and change the movement pathing was not something that we had available to us, or the ability to climb up vertical environments or go over or under, all those kind of things. So in this case, she goes to the bookcase and investigates the bookcase, and then is looking for codes, because she's been told that there is a jewelry chest on the table, and she knows that there's a combination lock, and the solution to that is hidden in these books. So finding those codes, she's going to be able to use that. But there's a dress that she's going to change into so that she looks more the part when she goes into the rest of the mansion. And when she goes to the jewelry chest, she can use those symbols she learned from the books to open up the jewelry chest and get a little tiara.
Ooh.
Which also then appears on the character's head. I'll just jump ahead a little bit here. And so as she comes downstairs into the ballroom, she can then try to listen in on conversations to get more clues about how to approach the judge and manage to get the ring from him. So these are all just kind of quick, give a quick example of the different styles of games you can do. There's a very wide range. So this is a trailer being done by our team in the Philippines. So this is a trailer for a game they're working on that's called Icarus. And it uses one of the other graphic sets that we start with for people in Adventure Forge. So there'll be 4 different graphic sets available. There'll be the Renaissance Venice for Fortunata. There'll be this kind of science fiction set, a kind of similar looking polygonal style for fantasy, and that same style applied to modern, kind of modern urban. 4 different settings you can go and start building stuff in right away. And these give you a kind of a big set of tools to be able to just, get right to the game, right to the story if one of those settings is appropriate for you. If it's not, then you can, of course, upload your own graphics. So this is an example of one of our artists who just brought in all of his own graphics. He put this together in one of our game jams we did a couple-day game jam, and he brought this in, and then we just added a little bit more game design to it afterwards. But so you can use all of your own graphics if you wish to make anything you want. This has a kind of a classic memory game built into it, and all of these games are all using the same tool set, right? They can look very different from each other, but all use the same tool set. You can also, some of our beta testers used different features in the tool set to create very different looks. So in this one, they use very large foreground and background paintings that they hack together around the isometric environment, so that it comes out looking entirely different from anything that we've done before. And it's just an example of how flexible the tools can be for making things. And all of these things that I'm showing were all done by non-engineers, right? They're all people just using the no-code system that we've created. And now maybe what I'll do is show a little bit about how that comes to be. So this is the Adventure Forge tool suite, our editor. And a game in Adventure Forge is made of scenes. And there are currently 3 different types of scenes. Basic scene, which is a static background on which events can happen. A 2D scene, which is a dynamic background, 2D background on which events can happen. So it would be used for something like the visual novel, or things like the memory game or books can all be done. The bookshelves can all be done in that environment, or an isometric scene on which events can take place. So the isometric where you've walking around and you have a conversation. Well, that would be done with an isometric scene and then a conversation event. So these three building blocks are the kind of core of it. And if we look at like the different examples we walked through for the Fortunata, because this is actually the Fortunata game that you saw. That's what this is right here. And if we go into the first scene here, this is the Choose Your Own Adventure.
Oh yeah.
So it is simply a series of blocks, and you can at any point, just say to connect them together. This uses a conversation node in our text tool. You have kind of basic text, which would be like a conversation block, a choice node, a page which combines text and choices, an input node, which is where you can then have the player type something in. And we also have the ability to import we have a little markup language. So if you wanted to write your big conversation or your big story or whatever in a text document and then import it, it'll then automatically build the trees for you based upon the little markup language. So you can see this just flows with each of these. When we open up each one of these, it has the text of the text that's presented here, and then it has if you want characters, portraits, and what the choices are. In this case, that you can lie or insist. Down here in the bottom right of the screen are the choices that are inside of this node. The background for it is a simple single image. If we go to the visual novel, the conversation on top of it looks pretty similar, right? It's using a different type of node because it was the nesting kind of conversation blocks versus the big page of text. And you can, of course, go back and forth between those. So these would be conversation, kind of little dialogue line, and then the choices that the player makes. What's interesting is that the background for this is a 2D scene. Mm-hmm. And in a 2D scene, we have our characters. So, for instance, Fortunata herself here, and or Leone, and Leone, as a designer, I can establish different
flirty, yeah,
different states, and which in those states can be reflected different poses, right? And then I can, in the conversation, simply tell the character to change their state, and it'll automatically change their pose in the scene, right? Or I can tell, and I can do that through. If I go back to the adventure here and open the text dialogue again, if I look at one of these, right, this has the line of dialogue, and it has this thing called tapped on logic. So when the player taps that conversation node, what's going to happen? And this is where we get into how we do logic and how we avoided having to do programming, so you don't have to learn any programming syntax. So in this case, it says, when the player taps on it, what do you want to have happen? Well, there can be conditions which says they have to tap on it and this has to be true before these happen. In this case, there's no condition, so it's always going to happen when they tap on it. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to play a sound effect. Everything we do is always based on drop-down menus, because you don't have to learn any syntax. You just say, oh, I want audio. I want it to play the sound effects, and I want to play it at the preset, and then I select one of my audio loops, and it's going to play that. I want to then also change the pose of the character. So I'm going to say Fortunata's image state is going to become equal to confused, right? So again, it's anything you've created. So like when you create the character Fortunata, she automatically shows up in this list. When you create the state confused, it automatically shows up in this list. So anything you create in the game automatically populates into whatever possible positions it needs to be for you to be able to use it, right? So this way, it's impossible to get syntax wrong. You can't write a bad line of code. Now you can make logic that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You still have to think about clearly what you want it to do, but it's able to do it. You asked about kind of like how do we make the various assets. So, for instance, here we have a bunch of characters in the game. that come with each of those graphic sets for characters for the sci-fi, for Fortunata, for fantasy, so on. But you can also upload your own characters. As you start to create abilities, things for them to do, those will automatically populate into this list, just like everything you make shows up in the appropriate list. So if I was making, for instance, their speaking animation, I can then say, oh, well, I want this guy to be much more expressive in his talking. So I can then, choose any animations I want him to present at any particular point. So I can then say, oh, have him use his ability angry, and then he'll do all these crazy gestations, when you want him to. On the location side, we have an editor that allows you to build all of those isometric locations, design those with any of the existing tile sets that we've provided, the Renaissance Venice, modern sci-fi or fantasy, or you can also create your own tiles and your own props, uploading the art you want to use for them.
It looked like it's basically just cubes that you stack the assets.
That's right. So it is a series of tiles. So if we open up, for instance, the tiles menu here, and you've got anything from floor tiles and walls. So these are all. All of your tiles are very, as you said, cube or kind of individual smaller walls, but they don't have to be necessarily 100% cube. But they are cubish, so that you're able to place them, right? But if I go into props, right, after I've got my location, the kind of fundamentals of location built, then I can go into props and say, oh, I want to put a chair down. It will then bring me all, these are all the different chairs that are in the system. You just grab a chair and drop it where you want it. So yeah, then you could add decals and lights, and then set the color and the range and the strength of the light, right? So that's how you can build these rather immersive environments. And then you can establish zones. So when I can then tie logic to that. If the character enters this square, enters this zone, then do this. Or if a bad guy enters this zone or whatever. So you can be able to do, set logic to trigger on all of those kinds of events.
I have to say, I have worked with some of similar tools like plugins for writing for games, and some of what you do when in the isometric one reminds me of some of them more elaborate, like virtual tabletops, like Tailspire and things like that. But I haven't had a tool where everything of this is kind of combined. And
exactly, that's a very good note. Because there are different tools that cover different subjects, like there's visual novel makers and choose your own adventure kind of makers, isometric. But we really wanted to put all of that in one place and make it so that you can really merge it. I also think that like our 2D tool that made everything from like that bookcase to the jewelry box to the memory game or to the interfaces you saw in the science fiction one. That's a very, very versatile, accessible tool to be able to use to create any kinds of those kind of interfaces or mini games. We've done hidden object games in there. Anything. It's really very flexible.
Okay, I have a few questions, and one is, can we combine the asset set? So like Venice and fantasy and science fiction, or if we decide it's going to be a science fiction story, I can't drop any of the fantasy assets in there, or is it all interchangeable?
Right now, the way that we've organized the content is they're in different kind of what we call universes, and each universe has its own content load, right? That said, you can, through the combination of saving and uploading, mix things together, right?
Okay.
It's just we've tried to organize them into kind of verticals to make it easier and more accessible, rather than trying to, if everything was all in one place, it would be too big of a initial download. But yeah, the essence of the tool is it should be your creativity that decides what's in there, not ours. And actually, for Fortunata, that's been a really interesting experience because half my experience of my career has been in tabletop, and the other half in video games. And Adventure Forge is really kind of bringing those two elements together. Fortunata is a good example of that because we are creating example games inside of the Fortunata universe, right? But the whole goal is that we're not the only ones who tell stories in there. We want to open it up like we do, like the Shadowrun tabletop RPG, right? It's like, sure, we publish adventures of ours, but the main thing we did was create a setting to unleash the creativity of the game masters and players,
Yeah.
right? And that's what we're trying to do here. So for Fortunata, we're not just creating the assets and our own games. We've also created the equivalent of RPG sourcebook manuals. So these are big PDFs that talk about the history of this version of Magical Venice and who the different factions are and how magic works and all these other things they're exactly like what we would do for a tabletop RPG. And now we're releasing those so that when you want to create stuff inside the world of Fortunata, you have a basis, a place to start from.
I wanted to ask about the setting for Fortunata. Why Magical Venice, basically at the height of its power? Because I think with the artwork, one of the splash pages looked like original artwork from the time, like painting that would actually hang in the Doge's palace or something like that. So was it because there is so many beautiful artwork and assets that you can draw from, or why did you come up with it?
Yeah, I think the inspiration for that was a couplefold. One, it is gorgeous. I've had the pleasure to go to Venice several times, and it's a magical place. There's no question about it. The artwork is so rich and lovely, and we did try to have both the painting style that our artists use and the isometric art that they created to try to capture some of that painterly approach, as opposed to trying to make it look like photoreal or anything like that. So art was definitely an inspiration, but Venice is also just politically and culturally always a really interesting place because of it. It was on the barrier, kind of on the border of huge, powerful cultures, right? And it always had to carve a way out to be able to both coexist with both of them, trade with both of them, be at different times, be at war with both of them, all of them. And so it was really interesting politically and culturally. And so, and then, we took it and had even more fun by introducing, a lot more of the kind of gods and aesthetic from the East, and the introduction of magic and how it worked in these very powerful families of Venice. So, and there was definitely inspiration points. I mean, there's no question that the Gentleman Bastard series was a definite inspiration point for us.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the Lies of Loch Lamora. I was yes. thinking about whether some of that went in there, but yeah, I absolutely see it. And I'm a big fan
there's no
too.
question. Those they were major, and those books were major inspirations for doing this. Absolutely.
Okay. I also wanted to ask about sharing games then on the platform, what the idea is. So probably is the tool going to be buying once, or is it going to be paying monthly? Is it a subscription service? And how is it going to work? And if I offer my game for other people to pay, is there going to be a part that goes to you for production of new assets and things like that? Well, what is the plan right now? The premise is that the Adventure Forge will be a free application in Steam and on our website, and then within the application would be a in-app purchase to unlock the editing tools, and whether that's a discrete purchase or a subscription, we're not sure yet. My guess at the moment is that during early access it'll probably be a discrete purchase, and then later after we exit early access we may transition to a subscription. Well, but TBD on that a little bit. When you do create a game and then you can determine who you want to share it with. This is something that was really important for me because in a lot of UGC environments, your only option is to share it with the whole world. But often you didn't write it for the whole world. You didn't create it for the whole world, right? If you made this just for your old Shadowrun players, right, and you want it's filled with all the in-jokes that only they are going to get, you really don't want somebody in Iowa or wherever ragging on you because they don't get the jokes, right? It wasn't made for them. They don't need to see it and be mean about it, So you should be able to share your work explicitly with who you want to share it with, right? Whether that's the whole world, which is great, or whether it's just your old Shadowrun group or with an individual, right?
And when if you do decide that you want to ask people to contribute for it, to pay for it, there is a revenue share relationship between Adventure Forge and the creator. It is going to be the way we're approaching it is it'll be much more generous in terms of the revenue share percentages, and than we see in traditional UGC like Roblox or something like that. And part of the reason for that is because we're asking people to help pay for the tools. That means that we have multiple revenue sources rather than trying to support the entire organization on the back of the people who are making monetized content.
Okay, good. So since I think we have to wrap it up. Also, I wanted to ask like one or two last questions, and one of them is like the time frame of when this is going to be ready. You were talking about beta testers, but those are just your internal people, I think. So there's probably also a TBD on when people will be able to try it out, right?
Yeah, we know it's this year.
Okay.
We just don't know exactly when it's this year. And there's a couple of factors that are playing into that. We are starting to increase our closed beta, and we do want to get that to be large enough so that we're really getting a good feedback from creators. We're being blown away already by what people are doing, like the one I showed with the paintings. So we want to learn both the strengths and the weaknesses more during the closed beta, and that's also why we don't have a finite date yet on when the early access would begin, but it will certainly be this year.
Okay, and the last one is: did you create this whole tool with your team just for it to be easier for you to write your games, to cut out the loop that you mentioned earlier?
It really is both. There was a selfish motivation that I just want to be able to make things, and I really have enjoyed just making things. It's so much fun sitting at night and oh, what if the characters went off and did this, and and you're able to just one night I was just like, I'm going to make it so that there's a whole little living world, because you can use the system to make these little kind of behavioral AIs. And so I had my little sailors walking around. They'd go to work, and then they'd get hungry, and then they'd go get a drink, and they were just doing that all by themselves, and it was just fun to make them and watch them run around like little Sims characters, Anyway, so yes, there's definitely a selfish motivation, but the larger motivation is that I think games are a powerful art form, and it's to me always been a problem that the people who get to work in that art form are so few. And typically very like each other. It's nowhere near as diverse culturally or racially as it should be for an art form of this power. And so my hope is that through Adventure Forge and other people's efforts like Adventure Forge, that the world gets to see a lot more voices in games and experience a lot more of what the world has to offer.
Okay. I'm really looking forward to both Tales of Fortunata, because their setting sounds really interesting with what you mentioned, what the input was and the idea was, and also to what people are going to do and what maybe I can do with the platform.
That'd be awesome. I'd love to see what you make.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.